March 22nd, 2023. The journal Nature publishes a study that destroys 200 years of Beethoven history. Scientists extracted DNA from 5 locks of Ludwig van Beethoven's hair cut from his head on his deathbed in 1827 and preserved by admirers for nearly 2 centuries. They tested the Y chromosome, the genetic signature that passes unchanged from father to son, the signature that proves paternity. And what they found is explosive. Beethoven was not his father's biological son. The Y chromosome doesn't match the Beethoven family line. Somewhere in his ancestry, his mother, there was an affair, an illegitimate child, a family's secret, buried for over 200 years. The greatest composer in Western history wasn't actually a Beethoven, but that's just the beginning. The DNA also revealed how he really died. For 196 years, scholars blamed lead poisoning. They tested his hair, found lead levels 100 times normal, built entire theories around toxic wine. The DNA proves they were completely wrong. Scientists found a virus Beethoven probably contracted in his 20s and carried silently for 3 decades. A virus that didn't just destroy his liver, it triggered a chain reaction that destroyed his hearing. 1 virus, 2 catastrophes, both wrecking the body of a genius who never knew he was a bastard. This is what 5 locks of hair revealed. This is the story that science buried for 2 centuries. When Beethoven died on March 26, 1827, in Vienna, he was already a legend, the greatest composer alive. Deaf for over a decade, but still writing symphonies that changed music forever. Immediately after his death, admirers rushed to take souvenirs. Locks of hair were cut, clothing was taken, pieces of his piano. This wasn't unusual in the 19th century. Great men were treated like relics. Over the next 200 years, locks of Beethoven's hair circulated through Europe and America. Collectors bought them. Museums displayed them. Families passed them down as heirlooms. But not all the hair was real. Some were fakes, forgeries, hair from other people, sold as Beethoven's. In 2014, a team of scientists led by Tristan Begg from the University of Cambridge decided to authenticate the samples and extract DNA. They gathered 8 locks of hair from collections around the world. Each lock had documentation, letters, certificates, provenance tracing it back to Beethoven's deathbed. They used forensic analysis, microscopy, chemical testing, and finally, DNA extraction. Of the 8 locks, 5 were confirmed as authentic. They all came from the same person. The DNA matched across samples. These 5 locks definitely came from Ludwig van Beethoven. 3 other locks were fakes. Different DNA. Different people. Frauds sold to collectors over centuries. But the 5 real locks opened a door. A genetic window into Beethoven's body. His diseases, his ancestry, his secrets. And what came out was devastating. The first test was the Y chromosome. Every human male has one, inherited directly from his father. It passes almost unchanged from father to son, generation after generation. This makes it perfect for tracing paternal lineages. The scientists compared Beethoven's Y chromosome to modern-day descendants of the Beethoven family line in Belgium. The Beethoven family originated in Flanders. Ludwig van Beethoven's grandfather moved from Belgium to Bonn, Germany, in 1733. He was a bass singer in the court chapel. His son, Johann van Beethoven, became a court musician and tenor. Johann married Maria Magdalena Keverich in 1767. Their son, Ludwig van Beethoven, the composer, was baptized December 17, 1770. That's the official story. Father to son, Beethoven lineage going back generations. But when scientists compared Ludwig's Y chromosome to the living Belgian descendants, there was no match. Zero genetic connection. The Y chromosome was completely different. This means one thing. Somewhere between Ludwig's great-great-grandfather and Ludwig himself, there was a break in the paternal line. Someone was not the biological son of their supposed father. An affair, an illegitimate child, a secret. The most likely scenario, Johann von Beethoven was not Ludwig's biological father. Maria Magdalena Keverich, Beethoven's mother, had an affair sometime around 1769 or 1770. She became pregnant. Either she didn't know who the father was, or she knew and couldn't marry him. Maybe he was already married. Maybe he was lower class. Maybe he was forbidden. So she stayed with Johann. Let him believe, or pretend to believe, that Ludwig was his son. And Johann raised the boy, taught him music, beat him when he didn't practice, pushed him relentlessly. The identity of Ludwig's biological father is lost to history. No records, no letters, no clues. Just the genetic evidence that Johann van Beethoven raised another man's genius child, and he probably never knew. Now here's where the story turns dark, because if Johann suspected, even unconsciously, that Ludwig wasn't his biological son, it explains the brutality. Johann van Beethoven was an alcoholic, a failed musician, a bitter man who resented his own mediocrity. By his 30s, he was drinking heavily. His singing career was over. He was broke, humiliated. And he had this child, this prodigy, this boy who could play piano better at age 7 than Johann ever could. So Johann exploited him, made him practice through the night, slapped him when he made mistakes, woke him at midnight to practice more, paraded him in front of aristocrats like a performing monkey. By age 7, Ludwig was performing publicly. By his teens, he was composing. By his 20s, he was in Vienna, revolutionizing music. And Johann took credit. Told everyone his son was a genius because of his teaching, his bloodline, his Beethoven heritage. Except none of it was real. Johann's genes weren't in Ludwig. The Beethoven musical talent? Irrelevant. The entire mythology of hereditary genius? A lie. The man who created the conditions for Beethoven's genius, the brutal childhood, the relentless practice, the exploitation, had no genetic connection to the genius he produced. And when Johann died in 1792, broke and alcoholic, Ludwig paid his debts, took care of him. Even though Johann had been a terrible father, even though the childhood had been brutal, because that's what sons do, even when the father isn't really the father. The irony is crushing. The DNA revealed that the Beethoven name, the name that became synonymous with genius, wasn't even Ludwig's by blood. But the DNA had more secrets. Because for 196 years, everyone believed they knew how Beethoven died. Lead poisoning. The theory started in the 1990s, when researchers tested Beethoven's hair and bone fragments. They found lead concentrations 100 times higher than normal. The explanation seemed perfect. Beethoven drank wine sweetened with lead acetate, a common practice in the 18th and early 19th centuries to mask the taste of cheap, sour wine. Over decades, the lead accumulated, caused neurological damage, destroyed his hearing, made him irritable, depressed, violent, eventually caused liver failure and death. It was tragic, poetic. The genius poisoned by the very substance that made wine palatable. Medical journals published papers. Biographies repeated it. For 2 decades, lead poisoning was accepted as fact. Then the 2023 DNA study destroyed it completely. The scientists found no genetic evidence of lead-related damage. More importantly, they found something else: Hepatitis B virus DNA in Beethoven's hair. Still detectable after 196 years. Hepatitis B is a viral infection that attacks the liver. It spreads through blood, sexual contact, or from mother to child during birth. Once infected, the virus stays in your body for life. Chronic hepatitis B slowly destroys liver tissue, causing cirrhosis, scarring that makes the liver hard, unable to function. Beethoven had cirrhosis. His autopsy in 1827 documented it. His liver was described as shrunken and leathery, with nodules the size of beans. Classic end-stage cirrhosis. For 200 years, historians blamed the cirrhosis on alcoholism alone. Beethoven drank heavily. Everyone who knew him confirmed it. Wine, beer, liquor. He drank to cope with his deafness, his loneliness, his creative agony. But alcohol alone doesn't always cause cirrhosis. The DNA revealed the missing piece. Beethoven had chronic hepatitis B. He probably contracted it in his 20s, possibly from a contaminated medical instrument, a blood transfusion, or sexual contact. Once infected, the virus stayed in his liver for the rest of his life, slowly destroying tissue, slowly causing inflammation. And here's the deadly combination. Beethoven's DNA also showed genetic variants associated with liver disease susceptibility. His body was genetically predisposed to liver damage. When you combine genetic vulnerability plus chronic hepatitis B plus decades of heavy drinking, you get catastrophic liver failure, which is exactly what killed him. By his 50s, Beethoven's liver was failing. His abdomen swelled with fluid, a condition called ascites. His skin turned yellow from jaundice. He suffered abdominal pain, nausea, weakness. In December 1826, 3 months before his death, doctors performed paracentesis. They inserted a needle into his abdomen and drained liters of fluid. The fluid kept coming back. They drained him 4 times in 3 months. Each time more fluid. Each time weaker. By March 1827, Beethoven knew he was dying. The hepatitis B virus that had lived silently in his body for 30 years was finally winning. But the virus didn't just destroy his liver. It destroyed something else, something that defined his entire life, his hearing. Beethoven started losing his hearing in his late 20s. By his mid-40s, he was almost completely deaf. By his 50s, totally deaf. He couldn't hear his own Ninth Symphony premiere in 1824. Couldn't hear the applause. Someone had to turn him around to see the audience cheering. His deafness is central to his legend. The deaf composer, the man who wrote sublime music while trapped in silence. For 200 years, people speculated about the cause. Lead poisoning? Syphilis? Genetic disorder? The 2023 DNA study checked for genetic causes of deafness. They tested for mutations in genes known to cause hereditary hearing loss. Result? Negative. Beethoven's deafness was not genetic. So what caused it? The most likely explanation is autoimmune inner ear disease. Beethoven's immune system attacked his inner ear, destroyed the delicate structures that detect sound. This matches his symptoms perfectly. Progressive hearing loss, tinnitus, ringing in the ears, episodes of dizziness and vertigo, all consistent with autoimmune damage. But here's the connection that makes it devastating. Chronic hepatitis B can trigger autoimmune disorders. The virus causes chronic inflammation. The immune system goes haywire, starts attacking the body's own tissues. It's possible, maybe even likely, that the same hepatitis B virus that destroyed Beethoven's liver also triggered the autoimmune attack that destroyed his hearing. 1 virus. 2 catastrophes. The hepatitis B he contracted in his 20s slowly destroyed his liver over 3 decades. And somewhere along the way, it triggered an autoimmune response that destroyed his ears. the deaf composer, the dying composer, both caused by a single virus that sat in his body for 30 years, destroying him piece by piece. Let's talk about what those final months looked like. By December 1826, Beethoven was bedridden. His abdomen was massively swollen. He looked pregnant. The ascites, fluid buildup from liver failure, made him grotesque. His skin was yellow. His eyes were yellow. He was weak, barely able to sit up. Doctors came. They didn't understand what was wrong. They tried treatments that made it worse, bloodletting, purgatives, useless. On December 20th, 1826, they performed the first paracentesis. Beethoven lay on his back, while a doctor inserted a long needle into his swollen abdomen. Fluid poured out, liters of it, yellowish, foul-smelling. The relief was temporary. Within days, the fluid returned. January 8th, 1827. Second paracentesis. More fluid drained. More temporary relief. February 2nd. Third paracentesis. February 27th. Fourth paracentesis. Each time the doctors hoped the fluid would stop. Each time, it came back faster. Beethoven's body was drowning from the inside. His liver couldn't filter blood properly. Pressure built up in his portal vein. Fluid leaked into his abdomen. There was no cure. No treatment, just draining and waiting. Friends visited, brought him gifts. Wine, which he probably shouldn't have been drinking, but did anyway. Books. Money. He was broke, as always. He joked weakly, made puns, complained about his doctors, but he knew he was dying. On March 24th, he received last rites from a Catholic priest. He was not particularly religious, but he accepted the ritual. His nephew Karl was there, a few close friends. He drifted in and out of consciousness. March 26th, 1827. Late afternoon. A thunderstorm rolled over Vienna. The sky turned black. Lightning flashed. Thunder cracked. Beethoven lay in bed, unconscious, breathing shallow. His friend, Anselm Hüttenbrenner, sat beside him. Suddenly, a massive lightning flash lit up the room. Thunder exploded, and according to Hüttenbrenner, Beethoven's eyes snapped open. He raised his right fist toward the ceiling, held it there, defiant. Then his arm fell. His eyes closed. He stopped breathing. Ludwig van Beethoven was dead at age 56. Killed by a virus he'd carried for 30 years. A virus and alcohol and genetic bad luck. Not lead poisoning, not genius burning too bright. Just biology. His funeral 3 days later drew over 10,000 people. Schools closed. Shops shut. Vienna mourned. The greatest composer of the age was gone, and for 196 years, no one knew the full truth, until 5 locks of hair gave up their secrets. Here's what the DNA revealed about the tragedy of Beethoven's life. He was born illegitimate. His mother had an affair. His legal father, Johann, wasn't his biological father. He grew up believing he was a Beethoven by blood. He wasn't. Johann raised him brutally, beat him, exploited him, pushed him to practice until his hands bled. And Johann did this to another man's child, a child whose real father is lost to history. Ludwig became the greatest composer in Western history despite this, not because of bloodline, not because of Beethoven genes, because of work, obsession, talent that came from somewhere else. Then, in his 20s, he contracted Hepatitis B, a virus that silently destroyed him for 3 decades. It triggered an autoimmune response that took his hearing. It slowly scarred his liver. It made him irritable, depressed, in constant pain. And he kept creating, even when he couldn't hear, even when he was dying. He wrote the Ninth Symphony while deaf. He wrote the late string quartets while his liver was failing. He wrote the Missa Solemnis while his body was destroying itself from the inside, not because suffering creates art, but because he refused to stop. The DNA doesn't show us a romantic myth of the tortured genius. It shows us a human being, illegitimate, infected, dying, and still creating music that outlived empires. That's the real story, not the fairy tale. The brutal, biological truth of a man who was never who he thought he was, killed by a virus he never knew he had, creating beauty while his body fell apart. The 5 locks of hair proved it all. 2 centuries of mystery solved by DNA. And the answer is more tragic than any myth.